Stefania Coley, our reporter. She has been out there working on this story, so I'm sure right now she is gathering details. But we did see what looked like an officer racing down the street there. Hopefully they're trying to contain this or trying to figure out how it all started or what happened. But we've been on a long week. It's been a long week for everyone there in Deer Park and people that live in the area. We were talking about benzene levels not too long ago. So many people obviously scared and concerned, and it looks like we are not done with this yet. It is just a huge plume that keeps going up in the air as we see right now.
Right, and we had breaking news earlier this afternoon when the Intercontinental Terminal Company, ITC, for the folks in that area, when that dike wall containing the product released during the recent fire eventually partially collapsed. And we saw that close perspective from Don Armstrong earlier of that collapse there. And now we have Stefania Coley. You see her. She's getting ready there. Stefania, can you hear us? Can you hear us, Stefania? All right, and I know you've been covering this all week, and once again we have this this fire reigniting in that big black plume of smoke there right behind you. Explain, what are you seeing there on scene?
The smoke as well, Chauncey, and really this just isn't good. We want to get back and show you guys this big cloud of smoke because this kind of started happening at the same time while crews were trying to deal with that dike wall that collapsed. You saw in that video earlier where that wall appeared to have shattered and that water was seeping out. This was the water, all of the foam in the water that firefighters were using to battle this fire, and they weren't sure where that water is going, but we know nearby is Taylor's Bayou, which also connects to the Houston Ship Channel. So now we have this fire going, a lot of smoke in the air. Crews were just speeding down Independence here. They're going to have to use more water and foam to put this out, and we are still not sure if they've been able to contain that other leak that started from that dike wall. That was the barrier that they had to hold all that water in, and there was still a lot of water in there, and this is only going to add to the fire, Myra and Chauncey. They were already dealing with a lot here at this plant, and this image right here is exactly how it looked earlier this week when several tanks were on fire. The hope, of course, is that this is just one take and they can keep it contained to that one take. But from here, I can see the flames lower down into the tank before that smoke starts, and it just appears that it is just going and going, and it has been doing this for at least the last 10 minutes here.
Towards the end of the week, and officials did tell me, this might happen. They did say this could possibly happen. They may reignite again, but it seems like they had it under control. But as we see now, that is huge. It's a big plume behind you. We saw those flames sparking up. And again, people that are seeing this is definitely bringing a lot more concern and wondering, when are we going to be over with this? When is this going to finally be put out and we don't have to worry about it?
Is that people appear to have just been starting to get comfortable. Businesses had reopened today. We know much of yesterday, Deer Park, Galena Park, they were under a shelter in place. That was lifted today. We know a small area was still under a shelter in place as of a couple of hours ago because of that dike wall collapse. But right now, as of today, much of Deer Park was just getting back into place. And now it appears that we are back to square one, Chauncey and Myra. As you can see from this very devastating image, this big, thick, black cloud of smoke protruding from the tank and a lot of flames covering that tank as well. It's not clear which tank this is, but we just know that it's just not good at all.
Right before you showed up live here on camera, we did notice police there rushing to the scene. I would imagine that fire department will also be rushing to the scene here shortly. What are you seeing there on the ground level?
Well, I want to point out we have two visuals here. We have Stefania Coley there reporting, and on the other side of your screen, you can see behind the skyline already. If you guys look very closely, you can already see that huge plume of smoke that's going up in the air just behind the Houston skyline. So that in itself is just crazy to see, and I'm sure a lot of people that are seeing this right now, you see that big cloud back there? That's the fire, and it took only a matter of minutes. We saw this in the newsroom. It started sparking back up. We saw the flame, and just like that, we can see it now behind the skyline. This is just incredible, the fact that we're still dealing with this after a whole week.
Right, and speaking of this week that we've been dealing with, we know 11 of the 15 tanks there at the plant did catch fire. Now, this all happened there at the facility after they announced they are working to empty those 2 million gallons of chemical that were burning inside the tank that leaked the benzene. Yesterday, that's what we were dealing with. Crews were supposed to move the chemical from the damaged tank to a more secure tank. That's what officials told us. But during that release, officials also said there was a possibility that we could see another benzene release, which was the concern today. The Houston Ship Channel also announced today that they were closing from Tucker Bayou to Light 116 due to the pollution from the fire incident. And of course, here starting back up again, and we see the flames and the big plume of smoke there, which is what we've been dealing with all week since Sunday when that fire started.
Yeah, and let's hope that the crews that are there are okay and safe, because we know there were hazmat crews out there trying to contain all of that, trying to make sure something like this doesn't happen again. But at this point, we're making calls. Obviously, we're trying to figure out what exactly happened. But when you look at the bigger picture, Chauncey, and as you mentioned, 11 tanks went up in flames. This is difficult. And of course, I would imagine something like this might happen again, because you're talking about a lot of chemicals there that were on fire for days on end.
Yeah. And officials then said they were unsure just how long it was going to take for the flames to burn out. And of course, we have the benzene scare that was happening yesterday. Of course, all the pollen in the air. So this has become a sort of dangerous mixture that a lot of folks in that area are dealing with. Can we talk about that a little bit with Chief Forecaster David Tillman? David, this is a dangerous mixture here, especially when you see this smoke just billowing back again.
Yeah, and I'm a little more concerned about that situation today than it was a couple of days ago. A couple of days ago, when we had the smoke, the winds were basically rising in the atmosphere, allowing most of the smoke to stay off the ground. But today, the air is kind of sinking out there just a bit. That might allow more of the smoke to make it back down to the ground. I was really hoping that we will be completely done with this smoke situation by today, because the weather conditions out there today are not conducive for this smoke staying off the ground. You can kind of see that. It is not rising very high into the atmosphere. It's kind of capped off right about there, and then it almost looks like it's trying to come back down at this particular time. So here is a look at what we're concerned about with this particular situation, with very light transport winds out there, very light surface winds near the ground in place, and we have that sinking air in the atmosphere. Check out wind speeds around southeast Texas. They're basically right now in that vicinity, coming in from the south and east and moving to the north and west. And the wind there is very light, in the vicinity of 5 to maybe 2 miles per hour at best. So the wind is not going to be transporting this a very far distance at all. As we look at transport winds out there, now this is up into the atmosphere. These winds are not all that strong either. So this is not a good situation. What this basically means is that this smoke has a chance, more of it, of being down towards ground level where we are, and that's something we're going to be monitoring very close as we go through the rest of the afternoon and evening.
David, yeah, thank you so much. Very alarming, of course, and I'm getting tweets from people taking pictures of it. They see it already and wondering, how is this even happening again? You know, it's just unreal that this is the picture that we're dealing with when we saw this Sunday, Monday, Tuesday.
And if you're just now joining us, breaking news, those tanks there at the ITC facility now back on fire. This, of course, after that shelter was put in place there for the plant's industrial neighbors and the San Jacinto, Texas State Historic Site. But once again, we see this fire reigniting. We're going to head over to investigative reporter Ted Oberg. And Ted, you've been out there this week keeping a very close eye on this as well.
Yeah, Chauncey, you're absolutely right. And that fire it looks exactly the same way it did earlier this week. And the way this happens is not much of a surprise. We've heard that this could happen. This morning at 10 o'clock, the company told us all there were still 60,000 barrels of chemical inside all of these tanks. Just to give you a sense, that's 2.5 million gallons of flammable toxic chemical that was still in those tanks. Some of them had been burned and collapsed. Others were still intact. 11, as you said, Myra, of the 15 tanks had burned in their entirety. This is the area we're talking about. Obviously, a picture taken well before the fire. This is the spot where the fire started on Sunday. This was the tank that we're most concerned about right now. That's the one that had leaked the benzene yesterday, tank number 7. We believe that there is still about 20,000 barrels of chemical inside that one. It's a chemical called pyrolysis gasoline. It's a high-octane blend of gasoline that I believe they sort of mix with other things to make the gasoline that goes inside your car. The issue is it is highly flammable. It's also 25 to 40% benzene. Benzene, both carcinogenic and a serious problem if it leaks. They've been tracking that on air monitoring maps all day and all week. We got the last spike of it somewhere in this area at about 4:30 this morning. It spiked to a dangerous but not actionable level is what they told us. The other thing they said, and if you have any video of that foam blanket, guys, go ahead and show viewers that. What they said was this afternoon they would be putting in more foam, but they'd also be submerging a pump into the foam blanket there to try and get some more of this material out and off-site. The concern with that is that it breaks the foam blanket. And when you break the foam blanket, it does two things. It allows air to get into the fire, which provides oxygen to anything that could still be hot, and it also allows the vapors to escape. I know we've talked about this a lot, but I think it is one of the best explanations. This is just a bottle of water with some soap bubbles on top, and that is really, chemists tell you, a very simple explanation of what this foam blanket does. It's not terribly scientifically high tech. What this foam blanket does is coats the water, coats the chemicals below it. It keeps the chemical vapor from escaping above it. It keeps oxygen from getting below it to allow a fire to restart. But if wind or motion or new equipment being submerged through this foam blanket allows some separation, well, then that's when a fire like this could happen again. Also, introducing any sort of equipment like a pump or anything that could spark could provide what we're seeing now out there at the scene. This, guys, it's not a terrible surprise based on what we've been hearing from this company. What we did not hear and what we should talk about is that break in the berm, right? That was one of the early problems in the midday today, is that a berm wall had collapsed and allowed some more of the water to escape. A massive fire like this will pull away anyone from the response to that berm and get them out of the way. It also looks, guys, like we might have two fires going now. You can see this one here and then a separate fire here. All of this would be in that same tank area, that same 15 tank area that's in the berm that we showed you there. There are still, as we mentioned, several tanks that hadn't burned. I believe by memory now, without my map, most of the tanks that hadn't burned are right in this area up here. It appears that that second fire that we just saw a second ago was somewhere in this vicinity. Obviously, there would still be a lot of chemical all over here, a lot of stuff that could still burn, and that's likely what we're seeing now. They do have the good news, a lot of firefighting crews on scene, a lot of ways to get foam onto this fire right now. Although we don't see it being put on in any great capacity right now. It may just be that our cameras aren't high enough to see where they're doing that, but we do know from one supplier that they had bought up the supply of that firefighting foam, every gallon of it, for 800 miles surrounding Houston, and it's all either at that plant or on its way there. Eric and Myra, they definitely have what they need to fight this fire. Now they just need the time to get it out.
A lot going on right there. Thank you for that live update right now. And thank you for joining us on Eyewitness News at 4. And as you've been seeing here for at least the last 15 minutes, it's what nobody wanted. But here, days after that fire initially started on Sunday, some stops and starts, reignitions. We thought it was under control, but here it is again, a fire, at least one, and possibly from what we're seeing, it looks like there's two different sets of smokestacks here going.
Yeah, Eric, and again, this is alarming just to see, because as you mentioned, we thought we were done with it. We thought we were moving on, assessing the damage and whatnot, but officials did say this could possibly happen again because, as Ted was mentioning, you're dealing with so many chemicals out there. And so right now I want to bring in Dr. Maureen Kahn Mayberry, an environmental toxicologist. Doctor, are you on the phone with us?
Yes, I'm here. Dr. Noreen.
Noreen, Dr. Noreen, thank you so much for joining us. So right off the bat, as you're seeing this, what is going through your mind? What can you tell us?
Well, I have been saying that this is an active situation, even though the fire was out, because I know how unstable these chemicals are at this point. The fact that they're solvents, the fact that they're heavier than air, the fact that, they're not being properly contained right now. What was left over, under the foam has, it's got auto ignition temperatures. It wasn't sealed in the foam. So I knew that this was a very active situation, and the possibility for reignition was a very real possibility. And so that's why I've been asking people to continue to be cautious, to continue to be vigilant, because, these chemicals are, they're serious, and that they are a very serious health hazard and environmental hazard.
Yeah, definitely. And I can see from the image. Now, correct me if I'm wrong, but it seems like when we were dealing with this early on in the week, the plume was rising higher. Now it seems like it's sort of more on the ground, if you will.
Right. And that could potentially be because those fires may be coming from the residual that was left over after they put the fire out. Whereas you had those large tanks burning from the top, igniting the tanks that were next to them, and you're getting more and more. You went from 1 tank to 2 tanks to 5 tanks to 8 tanks. So that's going to create a lot more chemicals that are burning, a lot higher plume.
And so, Doctor, I want to ask you right now, for people that do have issues and they're worried about, what can they do right now as they're seeing this on their TV screen?
Right. They absolutely need to limit their time outdoors, and they definitely need to limit any kind of strenuous activities outdoors, anything that would cause them to, breathe in, larger amounts of air than normal. Definitely, if you're going outside, those dust masks, unfortunately, they will not help you. They do not protect from chemicals. So don't think that putting on a dust mask is going to protect you from this, but definitely lower your exposure, lower your dosage to these chemicals in air by staying indoors. I hate to say that on such a beautiful weekend, but it really is important for your long-term health that you don't take those risks now. It is so important to err on the side of caution because, again, this is an active situation. This is something that is going to, have the potential to reoccur until they totally remediate and get all of those chemicals out of the plant.
And Doctor, of course, you make a great point. And at this point, unfortunately, shelter in place has become a standard drill over the last 5 to 6 days here. But when we were talking about how unstable this plant still is, because we can see a live picture right now of more foam going onto the fire, they're trying to offload those chemicals. And as you were noting, the foam that's on top of these chemicals, trying to keep them from reaching air so they don't reignite, is completely unstable right now as they try to offload the chemicals.
Right, and the foam is meant to extinguish the fire. It's not meant to be a cap or a protective covering to contain chemicals. So that is, part of the issue as well. And then I know that there was a containment breach earlier that was allowing some of the chemicals, I think, to get into the water.
Yeah, that's correct. Doctor, anything else that you can point out to us, to our viewers that have been dealing with this and on edge?
Right. Yeah, well, if you're feeling symptoms, if you're feeling burning eyes, if you have any kind of wheezing, if you feel headache, if you have an itchy throat, if you have any kind of coughing or bronchitis-like symptoms, definitely go see your physician as soon as possible. Call the nurse line if you can't see a physician. Don't open the windows in the evening. Don't hang out in the evening because in the evening the air quality degrades even worse. Don't drive around and turn on have your air conditioning going with the fresh air pulling in the air from the outdoors. And definitely, if you're in that area, seal those doors and windows. Don't run the air conditioning, bringing in outdoor air. And thank God it's not very hot right now, but this is not the time for fresh air exchanges because our air simply is just not fresh. It is full of chemicals at low levels. The major one that we're concerned about is benzene because it is a carcinogen that can raise your risk for getting multiple types of leukemia. So just be precautious. Pay attention to your symptoms. Again, limit the strenuous exercise outdoors. Don't, stop living your life. Don't be super afraid, but just take precautions.
Yes, common sense precautions I think we should all be taking right now as we watch this fire reignite Once again, Dr. Con Mayberry, thank you very much for your expertise and insight on this fire. Thank you.
Appreciate your time,
you.
Doctor. And right now, I want to go to a tweet from Deer Park OEM, if we can bring that up here in a second. So it seems like Deer Park out there, officials are aware of the situation. You can see that tweet that says, "We are aware of the flare-up moments ago at the Intercontinental Terminals Company, ITC, Deer Park site. The city of Deer Park is not issuing a shelter-in-place order at this time, but we are monitoring the situation." They say they will provide additional information as it becomes available. So no shelter-in-place there, if you guys are watching this.
Yeah.
But as the doctor was mentioning,
Yes.
if you do have symptoms, you're dealing with asthma, anything of that nature, she says, limit your time outdoors.
We'll have some confidence in that tweet because they have been quick to call for shelter in places
Yes.
before. So if they're saying to remain calm right now, we'll have confidence in their decision at this point. We definitely want to give you this vantage point right now because Ted was showing you this earlier from our smart board, and now here's Sky Eye with Don Armstrong in there. And Don, I want to say over the 5 days plus we've been watching this fire, we haven't necessarily seen 2 smoke plumes before. Can you kind of give us a better perspective here?
No, and to be honest with you, Eric, we're just now arriving on the scene. We were up for the 3 o'clock newscast, and I can tell you that there is fire, and it's near one of the tanks. Whether it's coming from the tank itself or outside of the tank, it's really hard to tell because the tanks are obviously compromised, and some of them are slumped over, so not exactly sure what's burning down there. It could very well be the pit or inside the retaining wall. But what is more concerning than all of this is this fire that's over here. And that appears to be, and I'm just speculating at this point because we're not in a position to be able to tell you exactly, but the ditch that all of the chemicals and the foam that was released earlier today in the past 24 hours, that is where the second plume of smoke appears to be coming from. I'm not sure. But it certainly is. It seems to me that that's where the fire is at this moment. And the scary part about it is there are other plants, needless to say, between the actual ITC plant and the storage tanks and this farm over here. And spherical tanks mean to me that those are pressurized tanks. Now, I may be wrong about that as well, but all of this is a major concern because it appears as though that the product that has leaked out of the ITC plant is now in the ditch, and that too is on fire.
All right, well, that's exactly what we were kind of getting to because we want to keep you here on your picture, Don, because that's what Ted was looking at, and he's gathering more information on our smart board. We'll get to him in just a second, but exactly, it is the area that it was breached earlier, and now we're seeing that. This is why we're probably seeing 2 plumes at this point, and those are the chemicals that have come out of that dike that was breached.
Well, that's right, Eric. And the scary part about it is that this leads into Taylor Bayou, and I'm showing you a picture of where that bayou is. It's in the center of your screen here, and it heads down, and you can see this tree line there. That is around the bayou that heads out into the Houston Ship Channel. So major concerns now because obviously the fire is outside of the ITC facility itself and into the ditch between 2 plants out here.
Okay, well, I tell you what, Don, that's a scenario I don't think anyone wants to see, that these chemicals possibly sitting there in the water somehow catch flame and start running through the areas all the way up to where those booms are. Let's hope these firefighters can get this contained quickly as possible. Don, thank you very much for the live pictures. We'll definitely keep you on standby and get to you in a minute.
Yeah, that's right. And of course, we do have so many reporters out there starting to gather information and get visuals for us. So I want to head over to Shelly Childers. She is in Baytown. And Shelly, what are you seeing from your vantage point there?
This is what's on our horizon. Photojournalist Wes Sewell and I arrived here just to speak with folks who are heading out on the water today because it is really a beautiful day out here. And as soon as we got out of our car, we turned around and noticed this flare up immediately on the horizon. That was right around 3:40. So just about 20 minutes ago when we first started to see that flare up. And of course, now it is covering the sky and we can kind of see it starting to move its way back west. The same pattern it was taking the past few days during those past reignitions. We spoke with some people out here who were getting off of boats, and they tell us that as they were getting off the boat, they were noticing that this had reignited. They were concerned, of course. Everyone is talking about air quality and now potential pollution in the water right here in the Galveston Bay area. They say that they had a nice time on the water. They didn't notice much quality difference, but they weren't fishing. They were just riding in their boat, not touching the water, just enjoying being on top of the water. And of course, now they're coming back to dock, and this is their view as they sit on the porch here at this marina to look at the skyline and see this reignition of the ITC fire. You know, just not what you want to see at all. And especially as we head into what is supposed to be a beautiful weekend, just knowing that this may impact so many outdoor activities for the rest of the weekend. But yeah, this is a good look from the marina. We're again in Baytown at the Bayland Marina right off of I-46. Back to you guys in the studio.
Shelley, thank you so much. We'll let you continue to go out there and try to gather information and visuals for us. We'll get back to you as soon as we can.
Yeah, all right. So let's get you caught up really quick. We know we've been watching this fire here. Here's another shot from Sky Eye.
Wow.
We had from the top of today, we had a breach in the dike wall.
Yes.
That released some of the chemicals they were trying to offload and also suppress with that thick layer of foam to keep them cool and from getting oxygen again. Because as we know, there's probably some hot spots in there or a possible spark. So now we're seeing those chemicals that were being run down this ditch catch fire, because there's still some hot spots in there at this point.
Yeah, and of course, you know, as I keep pointing out, officials did say that this could happen, especially when you're dealing with so many chemicals. And we want to head over to Ted Oberg once again, our investigative reporter. He has obviously been on top of this. He's been gathering a lot of details for us and talking to a number of specialists, Ted, that have been able to give us a bigger image of this, if you will.
Yeah, let me just give you a sense of sort of where we are. You saw it beautifully from Sky Eye there just a second ago, but back to the maps here. Let's just take a look. I want to show you. These are the tanks that we're talking about, right? The 15 tanks that have been on fire the better part of this week. But if you zoom out, what you'll see is that these tanks are connected to this ditch, right? And this ditch will run, my map isn't perfect, but it basically runs downhill, right? Out of these tanks and then headed ultimately down towards the bayou over here. Right? So here's Buffalo Bayou, here's Tucker's Bayou, there's the tanks, and what you had in Don's shot there just a minute ago was a river of fire. These chemicals are like gasoline. They are lighter than the water. They will sit on top of the water, and they were running down that ditch there and then had caught fire somehow and were sort of moving. It has to be considered an uncontrolled situation down there, likely having some connection to the breach of the levee wall that we talked about earlier today, that had to be either unexpected or certainly unplanned for. But now all of that is moving down, and they don't have, it doesn't seem, an easy way to get foam on top of that moving liquid as it leaves the facility and head towards Tucker and Buffalo Bayou.
That's what I wanted to ask you as well, Ted. Now, in this picture to the right on TV, you can see that one hose, that one lonely hose going on that ditch fire. And so now we're wondering if they were even prepared for this ignition, because they could have been out of place working on the tanks that are still offloading chemicals.
Yeah, I'm going to tell you, that is one guy without a whole lot of personal protective gear, and that is water. That is not foam going on that, if I look closely there. And it may not even be within the ITC facility. Remember, all of this space out here, there are numerous plants between ITC's tank farm and where it meets Buffalo Bayou. There are all sorts of facilities over there, and it does not appear that they were prepared for this. The breach hit as they were trying to do a pump operation to get the 60,000 barrels, the 2.5 million gallons worth of chemical that are still in those tanks. They were trying to pump those out. That breach hit, those chemicals that were underneath the foam, now on top of the water, moving through that ditch. These chemicals, I'm told by a chemist at U of H, have to be kept below 100 degrees in order to be safe and not catch fire. It is a warm day. These chemicals have been surrounding fire for the better part of 2.5 or 3 days. It is hard to get them to cool down. The company told us that yesterday at a news conference. That's what they were working on, and they were hoping that they could tank this stuff and pump this stuff away before something like this happened. This is a nightmare scenario with sort of an uncontrolled release. And even with the dozens of firefighting crews that they've called in from all around Texas, all around the Ship Channel area and Louisiana, it does not appear, Eric, that they had anyone along that ditch in any sort of preparation for this possibility.
Yeah, it's not what we want to see at all, Ted, because now you also see some other tanks that could possibly be in jeopardy, at least from heat off of that ditch fire as well, as it goes that way.
And one of the things they were doing all week, Eric, if you look at those Globe tanks or any of the tanks surrounding, one of the things they were doing at ITC all week was spraying foam and spraying some water on tanks that hadn't yet caught fire in order to cool them down. You don't see that going on. You haven't seen emergency responders headed to any of these tanks that are nearby to try and keep those from catching fire. That's clearly a concern. The company did say that all those pipes you see just outside the tanks that are crumpled and still on fire, all of those pipes have been drained of any flammable chemical. They did that early on.
That takes a little less anxiety out of the situation very much. All right, Ted, great information as always. And, of course, as we look at the smoke, Maida, you know what everybody's wondering. We spoke to that one expert already. Yeah. More smoke in the air.
Yeah, definitely. And it grew so quickly. We went on air just before 4 o'clock. And by now you can see that huge plume of smoke taking over the skies of Houston here. So we want to go over to David Tillman, our chief forecaster. David, of course, people are worried about this as well. What can you tell us?
You know what? We're using every tool we have here in the Weather Center to track where this smoke is going right now. And we're actually picking it up with Doppler radar at this particular time. You can see that this bubble of what looks to be a rain shower is actually the smoke from the fire that we've been following here this afternoon. There's Deer Park right there. There's Channel View right there. You can see where it begins right there and is drifting slowly to the north in the vicinity of the Channel View area right now along a very light southeasterly wind that's blowing at this particular time. So the weather conditions are different from what they were a couple of days ago in that the wind is not as strong, so the smoke is not going to carry as far as it did a couple of days ago. And instead of having rising air in the atmosphere, I hate to keep saying this, but the other day we had rising air keeping most of the smoke off the ground. Today we have a little bit more sinking air in the atmosphere, so I wouldn't be a bit surprised at all over the next day or two, or next several hours, I should say, that we get more people reporting, smelling, and being affected by this smoke. Here's a look at our tower cam time lapse at 3:48 this afternoon. You can see where the smoke was at that time. Notice how since that time the smoke has not moved all that much. Notice how it appears to be running into a layer of the atmosphere and not rising anymore. That's that high pressure beating down on the smoke, keeping it in the same general area out there. And you can see that it's only drifted just a little bit far to the north and west, just over towards the Channel View area. So you can see a tremendous tower cam of what is happening with the smoke, and basically what's happening compared to the other day is that the smoke is not drifting all that much. So this is the reason why we will continue to watch the situation from a weather perspective very closely this evening. We have very light transport winds in place, very light surface winds in place, and we have the sinking air in the atmosphere. That's why we're so concerned here. Here is the closest sensor to where the fire is located at this time. Look at the wind there in Pasadena, only blowing from the south and southeast at 2 miles per hour. Just an incredibly light wind that's blowing in the vicinity of the fire. Now you get a little bit farther away from there, the winds are more like 10 to maybe 12 miles per hour, but in the immediate vicinity of Deer Park, the winds are much lighter. Here's a look at those transport winds. Travis was showing you this just a couple of days ago. These winds were 10 to 15 miles per hour, which is actually very low in itself. This is the wind up around 5,000 feet. Today, those winds are at about 4 to 7 miles per hour. So that is just not enough wind to really carry this smoke away and disperse it like we had the other day. It's going to be concentrated basically in the same area. Now, unrelated to that is air quality today. The ozone is beginning to become unhealthy in that particular vicinity as well. We talked about it the other day that we could have a double whammy here if another fire were to develop and if the ozone was developing at the same time, we could have all kinds of air quality issues out there, and that appears to be what's happening right now. We have several reporting stations reporting unhealthy air for sensitive groups out there. So this is just not an afternoon to be outside dealing with this situation, guys.
Yeah, it is not at all, especially when we lay it out that way. David, I did want to ask you one question. I know you probably can't get back to that map, but the initial map you were showing where your weather radar is showing what looks like a thunderstorm over this site right here, and it was showing some different color variations as well. So what does that mean? We're looking at a plume of smoke and a fire here, so we see it turn from blue to green to yellow.
Well, and what's happening here is that the smoke is rising higher into the atmosphere. The radar beam actually moves up at a bit of an angle there. And so where it's basically contracting the smoke is where we're seeing the activity right now. Now we just got another update. So the smoke appears to be widening in scope just a bit, but drifting basically over the Channelview area. So I wouldn't be a bit surprised if people over Channelview, if you're not actually smelling some of this smoke from this particular fire, and we can actually track it with Doppler radar at this time. As a matter of fact, it almost appears to be curving just a little bit more to the north here. So those around Lynchburg might pick up a little bit of this as it continues to do that. So we're going to continue to track where this particular smoke plume is going. And if you can hold on just a moment, I actually want to zoom out here just for my own personal curiosity here, just to see what is to the north. We can kind of track this as if it is almost like a storm, if you will.
It's kind of heading right up the Beltway, and everybody to the east of the Beltway, right?
Yeah, east of the Beltway, there's Sheldon Road right there. There's Ashland Boulevard. And so if it continues to move in the direction that it's going right now, maybe the area up there around Highway 90, up around the Sheldon area and Barrett and places like that could begin to see some of that smoke drift in that direction. But the winds are so light, guys, that this smoke is drifting very, very slowly. So it's around the Channelview area right now.
All right, we'll say some prayers for some thick winds to drive it up in the atmosphere if we can. All right, David, thanks a lot.
Exactly. Okay, I want to go to another tweet, and this tweet is from the city of Galena Park. If we can bring up that tweet. So the mayor obviously tweeting this. She says, "We are aware of the reignition of the fire at ITC and Deer Park. We are monitoring the situation and will keep you informed. We are also testing the air quality in Galena Park," and that is the mayor, Esmeralda Moya, tweeting this out. And we're seeing a lot of officials obviously starting to do what they can and just let the public know. We know what is going on. We're trying to assess the situation, but I don't know if they were fully prepared.
No, well, it's a big question, and you feel for everybody in that area.
Exactly.
Deer Park, Pasadena, Galena Park, even places north of that, Channelview, the North Shore area, and on up the Beltway, because it's just when you think maybe things have calmed for a second and you can get back to life as much as possible at this point. Then you get another reignition here with 2 plumes of smoke and now a ditch on fire full of chemicals as well.
Yeah.
Let's go ahead and get you another perspective as well. We're showing some of these shots here from Sky Eye. Let's go back to Sky Eye. And we've got Don Armstrong up there. And Don, you've been monitoring this as we've gone to the smart board and as well over to David and kind of give us that look at the air quality. Are you seeing any possible headway in what firefighters down there are doing?
Well, that foam cannon is making some headway on the fire that's coming out from the bottom of the tank there in the center of your screen. But as we passed by just a moment ago, we noticed that there seems to be another small fire behind this tank that you currently can't see. Our major concern, however, is the fire that is in the ditch that goes between the ITC facility and Taylor Bayou. And this is that fire in the ditch where all of the product that was being held back by the dam, if you will, the wall or the bunker around the ITC facility let go sometime in the past 24 hours and released all of that product into the ditch. Now, when we were here for the 3 o'clock newscast, I noticed that over here in the left-hand side of your screen, where that gentleman is down there, too close to the fire in my opinion, but over on the left-hand side where the fire seems to end, they were working on building an earthen dam in the ditch. They had a dump truck full of dirt there, and that truck was waiting on a bulldozer to push the dirt into the ditch, and it appears as though that may have been successful, and that is why that fire has not gone on down toward Taylor Bayou. Let me pull back here and show you that. Taylor Bayou is right here, that tree-lined ditch that's right here. That goes directly into the Houston Ship Channel. But what is happening is all of the stuff on the south side of the ditch, on the other side of the fire here, that chemicals, all of the chemicals that are in the ditch, sorry, I have somebody else talking to me, that are in the ditch are headed into the Houston Ship Channel. That was a story that we had for you on our 3 o'clock newscast. This fire seems to be settling down somewhat, and maybe they're going to be able to let this fire burn itself out. But we're hoping that that's the case, because as you can see, there are pipes nearby, and just a little bit earlier in this newscast, matter of fact, there is that stream of water that one of the workmen was trying to get some water on those pipes. We believe that this may be a different facility from ITC. It appears to be their next door neighbor. We're working with our news desk to try to confirm that, and as soon as we get that information, of course, we'll pass it along to you. They are making some headway on the fire within the ITC facility with that foam cannon, as you can see here, but there appears to be a couple of streams of smoke coming from the fire itself. One over on the right-hand side of your screen, another one over on the left-hand side. I know that they do have at least 2 foam cannons. They're working with one right now. There's a piece of removal equipment you can see there with the orange boom that was inside the containment area. They were working with that earlier today, but at 3 o'clock they had stopped or ceased that, and so we're not exactly sure why that was ended. But in the meantime, the fire is getting under control within the ITC facility, but again, we're still worried about this one over here in the ditch headed down to Tucker Bayou. Back to you.
Yeah, John, and you know what? Just that brings somewhat of a relief, that image that you were showing us right there by ITC, because when we started the newscast, it was just a huge plume of black smoke, and now it looks like it sort of is a little bit under control. So, you know, like I said, that's good news and a little bit of a relief there.
Yeah, and it was a good call. As Don kind of noted, they were able to get that bulldozer, it looks like, dump sand and block that ditch off from being able to make its way with those chemicals into Tucker Bayou. Great work as usual. Thanks a lot, Don.
Okay.
Let's also get back out to the scene on the ground right now. I believe we have Stefania Acoli there. She's been there reporting throughout the week there in Deer Park. And Stefania, we know it's been pretty tough for you because the fire reignited. They've got crews ushering them out of the way as well. And so you've had to move. Tell us what's the latest.
Yeah, we just got moved back a few hundred yards here, so we're probably about a little bit more than half a mile away from the fire here, but you can still see the cloud of smoke kind of pouring into the air here. But as Troy was saying, it is calming down just a little bit here. I can tell you the first cloud of smoke was coming from the right-hand side, a tank over there to the right, and then at one point it appeared 2 tanks were on fire, or 2 separate areas, and you can still see where the sky is dark from that other fire that started back there. Not clear if this is a tank or what it may be, but it's just, we have crews rushing down Independence here. We are being moved back from the scene here. It's starting, the smell is getting a little bit stronger as well. People are coming out to figure out what's happening. We've seen people leaving in trucks, so it appears that all of the surrounding areas are getting evacuated as well, but we know that the area was already under a shelter in place because of that dike wall that collapsed. But the sky is looking very much so how it looked earlier this week when several of those tanks were on fire. But the good news is we don't see that cloud of smoke as thick as it was about an hour ago. It is very much so lightening up. It's still dark in the sky, but nothing protruding heavily from those tanks and that field area.
All right, Stefania, great report in there. Let me ask you a question. I can tell you've got that mask as well, which is going to be greatly needed right now. Do you possibly smell anything in the air?
I can't. I have the mask because I'm asthmatic myself, so I like to keep it on when I'm not talking to you guys. But I can't really tell what the smell is, but there is definitely a smell that was not here when we first arrived here to the scene. It started to get a little bit stronger as that fire started, but I can't really tell you what it is. This is my first experience with a chemical plant fire.
All right, Stefania Acoli live on the scene. Thank you very much for that update.
And the city of Deer Park continues to notify the public as much as they can via social media. They were tweeting not too long ago And this is what they just said just moments ago. They said, as a precaution, Harris County Precinct 8 is shutting down the Beltway Ship Channel Bridge. Additional information will be provided as it becomes available. So that is what the city of Deer Park is tweeting at this moment, and they're constantly trying to communicate with people as much as they can via social media, because as we know, a lot of people are able to check their phones quickly and get more information.
As we know, that's that massive bridge that goes right over that chemical area. It's a huge way home for a lot of people back and forth over the bridge. We've also got our ABC 13 reporter Nick Notario on standby as well. Nick, we know you've been kind of crunching and gathering some information as well. What's the latest?
Well, I've been looking at for the past couple of days about ITC claims and also ways that you can go about getting money through the legal system. A lot of people seeing this plume of smoke and maybe having some health effects and or damage to your property. Maybe some of that soot has fallen down, or maybe now your home value may not be as high. ITC put out claim forms. Here they are right here earlier this week, and they are both for individuals and businesses. You go to their website, itcclaims.com, which you can also get on abc13.com, and then you can submit these claims. You can ask for money for medical expenses if you had to miss work because of the fire. But if you fill out these forms, you take away the ability to sue the company later on. The lawyers I talked to told me that they were going to be filing their lawsuits by the end of the week. In fact, we did just get into our newsroom this afternoon. The first lawsuits against ITC because of this fire have been filed in Harris County Court. We have not been able to get the documents, so I can't tell you exactly how much people are asking for at this point. But lawyers told me yesterday that if you were involved in any of this, impacted that is, you can get money for things such as medical expenses. So if you had to go to the doctor, had to get prescriptions, buy a mask, but also if you had to put your child in daycare, hire a babysitter, or you just left the area and paid for hotel, food, or gas. And also business owners, if they had to close their doors because of this, or they're not seeing the same amount of foot traffic, you can apply to get money that way. The most important thing you can do if you're impacted by any of this, or you have been over the past several days, lawyers say, is go see a doctor. That way, everything is documented, not just on from the doctor, but also keep a diary. Keep note. How do you feel? What's going on? What symptoms do you have right now? This way, later on, when your memory starts to fade, you'll have all that information. Now, all of this has to be done in a timely manner as well. ITC, to fill out these forms, they're due by June 25th. So you have about 3 months in order to get them done. Lawyers tell me that you got to get to the doctor right away and then see them. Time is ticking. And with this going on right now, you can only imagine more claims and or lawsuits are going to be filed in court, guys.
All right. A very good point right there. Thanks a lot, Nick. Let's go ahead and show you kind of the backup we were talking about. We just talked about the tweet a second ago, Maida, and here it is.
Yeah, so we were telling you that Deer Park was saying, as a precaution, that Harris County Precinct 8 was shutting down the Beltway 8 Ship Channel Bridge, and as you can see, it is already seeing some backup. So we're talking about 4:30 on a Friday afternoon. People were trying to get home, maybe going to other places out and about, but again, it is closed as a precaution, and we're already seeing bumper to bumper there in that area, this traffic jam camera here.
Yeah, of course, again, as everybody knows, this is that huge ship channel bridge there on the East Beltway. It goes right over that entire petrochemical area there on the east side of town. And so this is going to be a long ride home, because at this point, your options either to try to hit 146, which might not look too good at this hour either because of what's going on, or go back into town and try to hit 610 and go south on that to hit either I-10 or 45 as well. So this is going to be a rough commute home for a lot of people, but this is what we're dealing with right now throughout the week. So let's hope they can get a handle on the flames there and the smoke and somehow get these roads back open.
And it's a very fluid situation, Eric. So, of course, people just be patient. All emergency officials out there are trying to do what they can, assess the situation, get it under control, give us information as fast as they can so that we can relay it to you, the public. But, you know, you will encounter situations like that, like back up on the Beltway 8 bridge. So
we've been trying to give you so many different vantage points here on this breaking event right here. We've been showing you Sky Eye. We've been showing you live shots from Deer Park, from Stefania Acoli. We've also been taking you to Baytown at times just to give you another vantage point of that plume. But this is another picture from Sky Eye, and you can see some of those crumpled tanks right there. Just some of the damage from the fire that began on Sunday and has reignited at least twice, as we know of at this point, as that huge foam cannon continues to be sprayed on those tanks.
We want to go back to Shelley Childers. Shelley, you're over at Baytown. Tell us about what you are seeing now. And I know when we first talked to you minutes ago, we could see the plume of smoke behind you, and it looks like now it's gone. Is that accurate?
That is, yes, it is accurate. That's exactly what we've been wanting to show you guys, Eric and Maida. Behind me, you can see the plume appears to be completely gone. There are just wisps of it in the air now, continuing to move with the breeze. We don't have word yet, but it appears they may have gotten this most recent reignition under control. Hopefully that's what happened, and that this is some very good